Nobody chooses to be a complainer. They just never learned the difference between feeling something and doing something about it. You know both types. The person who sees a problem and moves, and the person who sees the same problem and talks about it for 3 years. Most people assume it comes down to motivation, discipline, willpower, maybe genetics, maybe luck. That's the comfortable explanation. Because if it's about willpower, you can always get more of it tomorrow. Tomorrow is safe. Tomorrow doesn't require anything from you right now. But that's not actually what separates the two types. The gap isn't about energy. It's not about ambition. It's not even about intelligence. It's about something much more specific, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. The first thing you need to understand is this. Complaining is not laziness. Complaining is a coping mechanism. It gives the brain a release valve. When you verbalize a problem, your nervous system gets a small amount of relief, not because anything changed, but because the brain registers expression as partial action. It doesn't know the difference between talking about a problem and solving it. It just knows something happened. So the pressure drops slightly, and with it, the urgency to actually move. This is why complainers aren't stupid. They're often highly aware of their problems, sometimes more aware than the people who are out there fixing things. They just found a way to discharge the discomfort without the cost, and the brain learns fast. If talking gives relief, it keeps choosing talking, until that becomes the default response to friction. Now here's the second layer. People who act don't have less discomfort. They have a different relationship with discomfort. They don't experience friction as a signal to stop. They experience it as noise, something that's just there while you work. That difference didn't come from nowhere. It was built through repetition, through environments that forced action and then rewarded it, through small moments where someone pushed through something uncomfortable and discovered they survived. That discovery, that discomfort doesn't kill you, is the foundation of every person who moves. And if you never had those moments, the opposite gets wired in. Discomfort becomes a stop sign, not because you're weak, because that's what you were taught, directly or indirectly. Third layer, identity. This is the one most people miss. At a certain point, the behavior stops being a habit and becomes a self-concept. The complainer doesn't just complain, they become someone who complains. And identity is the most powerful behavioral force that exists. You will always act in alignment with who you believe you are, not who you want to be, who you believe you are right now. So when an opportunity appears, the complainer doesn't consciously choose inaction. Their identity filters it out before it even reaches a decision. The thought appears, I could do something about this, and the identity responds, that's not really you, and the moment passes, and they never noticed it happened. Fourth, locus of control. Psychology has a term for where people believe control lives. Internal locus. You believe your actions determine your outcomes. External locus. You believe outcomes are determined by things outside you. People who act overwhelmingly lean internal. People who complain overwhelmingly lean external. This isn't about optimism. It's not about toxic positivity. It's a structural belief about causality. If you believe the system is the problem, and only the system changing will fix things, then action on your part is literally pointless. Why would you act if acting doesn't matter? The complaint isn't irrational given that belief. It's the logical output of it, which means the behavior won't change until the belief does. And the belief is usually old, usually built in childhood or early adolescence, usually reinforced by watching the adults around you. If the people who raised you complained and nothing changed, that became your model of how the world works. Fifth, risk calibration. Action carries risk. If you try something and fail, you now have evidence that you failed. That evidence becomes part of your self-concept. Complaining carries almost no risk. If you talk about what you do but never do it, there's no failure. The potential version of you, the one who would have succeeded, stays intact, protected. This is why many high-functioning, intelligent people stay stuck in complaint loops for years. It's not that they can't see the path. It's that walking the path creates the possibility of permanent evidence against themselves. The fantasy of what they could do is worth more to them than the reality of finding out. Complaining preserves the fantasy. Action kills it, or proves it true. And for some people, the risk that it won't be true is too high. Sixth, social reinforcement. Complaining is socially rewarded. When you complain, people validate you. They agree. They share their own complaints. The group bonds over shared grievance. That's real social currency. Action doesn't give you that. When you start moving, when you actually do the thing, the group often doesn't celebrate. Sometimes they resent it, because your movement implicitly challenges their stillness. So the complainer stays in the group, gets the validation, gets the belonging, and stays exactly where they are. The person who acts often loses social comfort in the short term. They move out of the group before they've arrived anywhere new. That gap between leaving and arriving is where most people turn back. Now sit with this for a second, because this isn't just about other people. Think about the last time you complained about something, really complained, not vented once and moved on, but returned to it, brought it up again, rebuilt the case for why it's unfair, why it's hard, why it's someone else's fault. What did that give you? Relief, temporary, small. And then the problem was still there. And you were slightly more wired to return to that relief next time instead of doing something harder. That's the loop, and most people are in it without knowing they're in it. Here's what's actually uncomfortable about this. The gap between doers and complainers isn't talent. It's not resources. It's not opportunity, not always. It's mostly accumulated small decisions about how to respond to friction, made over years, quietly, without drama. The doer didn't decide one day to become a doer. They just responded to small discomfort with small action, enough times that it became automatic. The complainer did the same thing in reverse, which means you are right now, in this moment, building one of those two patterns. Every time something goes wrong today, your brain is running a program. It's either running, express the discomfort and release it, or feel the discomfort and move anyway. And whichever one you run today is slightly more likely to be the one you run tomorrow. That's not inspiring. That's just how behavioral loops work. You also need to understand what complaining costs beyond time. It costs perception. People around you are calibrating who you are based on how you respond to problems, not based on what you say about yourself. Based on the pattern they observe, you may not think people notice. They notice. They file it. They make decisions about what to trust you with, what to include you in, what to say around you, based on that pattern. The complainer often doesn't know they've been quietly filtered out of opportunities, because no one announces it. They just stop being considered. And then they have more to complain about, and the loop tightens. There's also something that happens internally over time. Every complaint you make about something you didn't try to change is a small withdrawal from your own self-respect. You might not feel it as that. It might feel like honesty, like realism, but underneath it, the brain is logging the gap between what you said mattered and what you actually did about it. That gap accumulates. It becomes a quiet background noise of inadequacy. Not loud, not dramatic, just there, constant. And it shapes how much you believe in yourself when the next opportunity appears. The doer isn't more talented, they just have fewer of those logged gaps, less internal noise, more available bandwidth to actually move. The complaint was never about the problem. It was always about the cost of solving it.